I'll craft a vivid and compelling story from the adopted daughter's perspective. Stay tuned. When my receptionist called to confirm my next appointment, I nearly choked on my coffee. "Dr. Morgan, your 2:30 is here. A Mr. Adam Williams," she said casually, unaware of the jolt her words gave me. Adam Williams wasn't just a patient, he was my father. I checked the details on the file she'd just handed me. There it was, clear as day. Adam Williams, age 44, presenting symptoms of discomfort down there. A nervous laugh bubbled up inside me, but I quickly smothered it. What on earth was he thinking, booking an appointment with me, a urologist, his adopted daughter? I took a deep breath and forced my professional mask firmly into place. This was just another consultation, I told myself. Just another patient. "Send him in," I said, my voice steady. He walked in moments later, looking far too casual in a navy button-down and jeans. His eyes darted around my office, landing on the certificates framed neatly on the wall before settling on me. There was an awkward pause as he scratched the back of his neck. "Hey, kiddo," he said, his voice warm but hesitant. "Long time no see." I raised an eyebrow. "Dad, what are you doing here? Didn't your receptionist tell you?" "I've got a, situation." His eyes flicked to the examination table and then back to me. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. "You know there are other urologists in the city, right? Good ones. Ones who didn't, grow up calling you Dad." His lips quirked into a sheepish smile. "Yeah, but I trust you more than anyone else. And, well, this isn't exactly something I want to talk about with a stranger." I couldn't help but chuckle, the tension between us easing slightly. "All right. But let's set some ground rules. You're not Dad in here. You're Mr. Williams and I'm Dr. Morgan. Understood?" "Understood," he said, though the grin tugging at his lips told me he wasn't taking this half as seriously as I was. The appointment went smoothly, all things considered. He described his symptoms, minor discomfort he'd been ignoring for weeks, and I maintained my professional composure even when he squirmed under the glare of my medical questions. I scheduled a few tests and handed him a prescription, making sure to avoid his gaze as I explained the follow-up plan. "Thanks, Doc," he said as he stood, the teasing lilt in his voice unmistakable. I rolled my eyes, feeling the corners of my mouth twitch despite myself. "Don't make this a habit." But as he turned to leave, something flickered in his expression, a vulnerability I hadn't seen before. Stopped me cold. "Hey," I called after him. "Everything okay?" He paused in the doorway, his back still to me. For a moment, I thought he might brush me off with a quick "yeah, sure," but when he turned, his eyes were clouded with something heavy. "Can I be honest, Zoe?" he asked, his voice softer now. "Of course," I said, surprised by the shift in his tone. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck the way he always did when he was unsure of himself. "I didn't just come here because of the, medical stuff. I've been feeling kind of lost lately. You're the closest thing I've got to someone I can really talk to, and I didn't know how else to reach out." The air in the room seemed to thicken, the casual banter between us replaced by something deeper. "I'm always here for you, Dad," I said softly, slipping for a moment back into the role of daughter instead of doctor. "You don't need an excuse to come to me." A faint smile touched his lips, and he nodded, his eyes lingering on mine for a moment longer than necessary before he left. As the door clicked shut behind him, I found myself sitting there, staring at the space he'd just occupied. The oddity of our relationship, father and daughter, yet something else entirely, pressed against my thoughts. I'd always known there was a bond between us that felt different, more intense, but until now I hadn't dared to examine it too closely. That day, as I turned my attention to the next patient, I couldn't help but wonder if he felt it too. After work, I couldn't shake the lingering weight of our earlier conversation. My father had never been the kind of man to openly admit vulnerability, and the fact that he had done so today stayed with me. Something about his words about feeling lost made me feel guilty for how little I had been around him lately. So I decided to swing by his place unannounced. His house was exactly as I remembered it, warm and inviting with a soft glow spilling out from the living room window. As I approached the front door, I hesitated. Was I overstepping? Would he find it strange for me to drop by out of the blue? I brushed the doubts aside, reminding myself that he had come to me today, vulnerable and open. This was my turn to show up for him. The door creaked open before I had a chance to knock. Zoe. His surprise quickly morphed into a smile that reached his eyes. What are you doing here? Not enough time with me at the office, huh? I laughed. Thought I'd check on my favorite patient. See how you're holding up. He stepped aside, waving me in. Well, this is a nice surprise. Come on in, kiddo. The familiar scent of his cooking hit me immediately. Garlic, rosemary, and something savory. Were you making dinner? Yeah, he said, leading me into the kitchen. I figured I'd throw something together. Haven't had a proper meal all week. You hungry? Always, I admitted with a grin, sliding onto one of the bar stools by the counter. He worked with ease, stirring a pot on the stove while occasionally glancing at me over his shoulder. His movements were calm and deliberate, a stark contrast to the uncertainty I'd sensed in him earlier. So, he said, flipping something in a pan, how was the rest of your day? You seemed pretty swamped when I left. Busy as always. But it's good. I like staying on my toes, I said, watching him. That's my girl, he replied, the pride in his voice unmistakable. You've always been a hard worker. Your mom and I used to marvel at how much drive you had, even as a kid. I smiled, the mention of mom bittersweet. She'd been gone for years now, but moments like these brought her presence back, even if only fleetingly. As we ate, the conversation flowed easily. He asked about my life, work, friends, whether I was seeing anyone. His questions were laced with genuine curiosity, and the way he listened, hanging on my every word, reminded me of how much I'd missed these moments with him. You know, he said, spearing a piece of chicken with his fork, I'm really proud of you, Zoe. I don't say it enough, but I should. You've built this amazing life for yourself. Sometimes I don't even know how I got lucky enough to be your dad. I felt my cheeks flush, his words catching me off guard. Thanks, Dad. That means a lot. Just telling the truth, he said with a shrug, though the softness in his eyes suggested it wasn't so casual. After dinner, he insisted on cleaning up, shooing me into the living room with a glass of wine. I settled into the couch, listening to the clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Moments later, he joined me, dropping down onto the couch with a relaxed sigh. This feels nice, he said, leaning back and glancing at me. You being here. You should come by more often. I turned to look at him, surprised by the intensity in his gaze. I will, I promised. I didn't realize how much I missed it until now. A slow smile spread across his face. Good. Because I missed it too. He leaned over and pulled me into a hug, the kind that was warm and firm, like he was trying to convey everything he couldn't put into words. I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. For a moment, the world outside his home faded, leaving just the two of us in the comforting silence. When he finally pulled back, his hands lingered on my shoulders, his thumbs brushing lightly against my collarbone. His expression was hard to read, soft yet searching. I mean it, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You should come more often. It's nice having you around. His eyes locked onto mine, and there was something in his gaze that made my breath hitch. It was unspoken, a quiet intensity that lingered far longer than it should have. I wasn't sure what to do with it, whether to lean into it or step away. But before I could decide, he broke the moment with a small laugh, shaking his head as if to clear it. Look at me, he said, his tone lighter now. Getting all sentimental. Must be the wine. I laughed, though the tension in my chest hadn't entirely eased. It's okay, Dad. I like sentimental. Yeah, he asked, his smile softening. Well, maybe I'll make it a habit then. We talked for a while longer, the conversation dipping back into lighter topics. But even as I laughed at his jokes and listened to his stories, I couldn't shake the weight of that look he'd given me earlier. It was as though he'd wanted to say something but couldn't bring himself to voice it. When I finally left, he walked me to the door, his hand resting lightly on my back as he opened it. "Drive safe," he said, his voice warm. "And don't be a stranger, okay?" "I won't," I promised, stepping out into the crisp night air. As I drove home, his words replayed in my mind along with the way he'd looked at me. For the first time, I began to wonder if there was something between us, something deeper than the bond we'd always shared. And if there was, what did that mean? The next morning, as I sat in my office reviewing charts, my phone buzzed on the desk. I glanced at the screen to see a text from my father. "Come over tonight for a delicious duck and wine. I promise it'll be worth it." I couldn't stop the smile that crept across my face. His enthusiasm radiated through the words, and the thought of another evening together felt like a comforting promise. It surprised me how much I was looking forward to it. The hours dragged until the end of the workday. By the time I returned home, I had already made up my mind. I'd pack a small bag and stay with him for a few days. It felt spontaneous, but something inside me craved the familiarity of his presence, the way he had so easily pulled me out of my usual routine just by being himself. When I arrived at his house, the glow of the porch light felt like a beacon against the deepening dusk. Before I could even knock, the door swung open. He stood there with an apron tied around his waist, a warm smile stretching across his face. "You're early," he said, his eyes lighting up as they met mine. "Not that I'm complaining." I held up my bag. "I thought I'd stay for a couple of days. If that's okay." "Okay," he repeated, his voice brimming with delight. "Zoe, that's more than okay. It's the best news I've heard all week." The genuine happiness in his expression made my chest tighten in a way I couldn't quite explain. He reached for the bag, brushing my hand as he took it from me. The warmth of his touch lingered, and for a brief moment I forgot how to breathe. "Come on," he said, ushering me inside. "Dinner's almost ready. You're going to love this." The house smelled incredible, rosemary, garlic, and something rich and savory wafting from the kitchen. I followed him in, watching as he moved confidently around the space, checking the oven and stirring sauces. "Since when do you cook like this?" I teased, leaning against the counter. He shrugged, a playful grin tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Since I had someone special to impress." The words hung in the air for a moment, heavier than he seemed to realize. My stomach flipped, and I quickly turned my attention to pouring us both glasses of wine. Over dinner, the conversation flowed effortlessly, just as it had the night before. He told stories from his work, sprinkling in his signature dry humor that always managed to make me laugh. I shared a few anecdotes from the clinic, and he listened intently, his focus entirely on me. "You're amazing, you know that?" he said suddenly, setting his fork down and leaning back in his chair. I blinked, caught off guard by the sincerity in his tone. "What?" "You. Everything you've accomplished. The woman you've become. Sometimes I feel like I don't tell you that enough." The words hit me with an unexpected force, a warmth spreading through me that I didn't know I needed. "Thanks, Dad," I said softly, though the word Dad felt oddly out of place in that moment. After dinner, we settled into the living room with our wine. The room was dimly lit, the soft glow from the fireplace casting flickering shadows on the walls. I sat on the couch, tucking my legs beneath me while he took the seat beside me. "You know," he said after a moment, swirling the wine in his glass, "I'm glad you decided to stay for a while. I've missed this, having you around." "Me too," I admitted. "I didn't realize how much until now." He reached out, resting a hand on my shoulder. Touch was warm, grounding, and I felt myself leaning into it almost instinctively. "You mean the world to me, Zoe," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I glanced up at him, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. His eyes seemed to search mine, as if looking for something unspoken. My pulse quickened, but I couldn't bring myself to look away. "I mean it," he continued, his thumb brushing lightly against my shoulder. You're the most important person in my life. Always have been. There was a weight to his words, a depth that made my chest tighten. I nodded, unable to find the right response, and he pulled me into a hug. It wasn't the kind of hug we used to share, quick and casual the way parents and children often do. This was different. His arms wrapped around me with a firmness that felt protective, almost possessive, and I melted into him, resting my head against his chest. "You're safe here," he murmured, his voice low and steady. "Always." Something about the moment felt impossibly tender, and I found myself clinging to him just a little tighter. The world outside his house, with all its noise and demands, faded away. In his arms, I felt a sense of belonging I hadn't realized I was missing. His gaze locked onto mine, and for a moment it felt like the air between us was charged with something unspoken. "You should get some rest," he said softly, though his eyes didn't leave mine. "Yeah," I whispered, my voice unsteady. As I made my way to the guest room, my heart raced in a way I couldn't quite explain. Something between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure what it meant, or where it might lead. But for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone. The house was quiet, save for the rhythmic ticking of the clock on the wall. I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The events of the evening played over and over in my mind. The way he'd looked at me, the warmth in his touch, the depth of his words. I told myself it was just the wine, just the intimacy of the moment. But a part of me knew it was more than that. Something between us had shifted, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to pull it back or let it unfold. I was startled from my thoughts by a soft knock at the door. "Zoe." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "You awake?" My heart skipped a beat. "Yeah," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. The door creaked open, and he stepped inside. He was still dressed, though his shirt was slightly rumpled, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He hesitated in the doorway for a moment, as if unsure whether to stay or go. "Can I sit?" he asked. I nodded, sliding over to make room on the edge of the bed. He crossed the room slowly, the soft glow from the hallway casting shadows across his face. When he sat down, the mattress dipped slightly beneath his weight. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted, his voice quiet. "Me neither," I said, though I wasn't sure why. He glanced at me, his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place, tenderness, maybe, or something deeper. "Zoe," he began, running a hand through his hair, "I've been thinking about us. About this." I swallowed hard, my pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" He turned to face me fully, his expression earnest. "You're not just my daughter, Zoe. I mean, yes, of course you are. But you're also this incredible woman. Someone I admire, respect, and—" He trailed off, his gaze dropping to his hands. I don't know how to explain it without sounding wrong. I felt a lump form in my throat, his words echoing the confusion swirling in my own heart. "I know," he interrupted gently, his voice steady but soft. "I know how it sounds. And I know what people would say. But what I feel when I'm around you," he shook his head as if trying to clear his thoughts. "It's different. It's more." I didn't know what to say, my mind racing as I tried to make sense of what he was telling me, what I was feeling in response. The warmth in his eyes, the gentleness of his touch earlier that evening, the way his words had lingered in my chest. It all came rushing back, leaving me breathless. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "But I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. You mean so much to me, Zoe. The more than I ever thought possible." The room felt impossibly small, the air between us thick with emotion. I looked at him, seeing the vulnerability etched into his features, and something inside me shifted. "Dad," I said finally, my voice trembling, "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied quickly. "I just needed you to know. That's all." But the way he looked at me, the way his hand brushed against mine as he spoke, told me there was more he wanted to say, more he wanted to feel. "I've missed this," I admitted, my words spilling out before I could stop them. Being close to you. Feeling connected. His eyes softened and he reached for my hand, his touch gentle but firm. You're the most important person in my life, Zoe. That's never going to change. I nodded, the weight of his words settling over me. Slowly, he leaned forward, pulling me into an embrace. His arms wrapped around me with a tenderness that felt both familiar and foreign, and I rested my head against his shoulder, letting the steady rhythm of his heartbeat calm my racing thoughts. We stayed like that for what felt like hours, the silence between us filled with unspoken emotions. When he finally pulled back, his hands lingered on my shoulders, his thumbs brushing lightly against my skin. "Get some rest," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. "We can talk more in the morning." I nodded, watching as he stood and made his way to the door. But just as he reached the threshold, he turned back, his eyes meeting mine one last time. "Good night, Zoe," he said, his voice warm. "Good night, Dad," I replied, though the word felt heavier now than it ever had before.